What you're about to see isn't a gotcha moment. It isn't a partisan ambush. It's Representative Joe Neguse showing what real congressional oversight is supposed to look like, asking fair, necessary questions to help the public understand whether the people running our justice system are acting with integrity, independence, and basic ethical judgment.
Gentleman yielding. With that, we now recognize the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. I have a couple of questions regarding a terrible shooting that occurred in Colorado, a state, as you may know, that I represent. You've testified previously about, I think, what you would describe as your efforts to provide more information regarding the investigation with respect to the horrific assassination of Mr. Kirk. And so, in that same vein, I'm hoping you can provide this committee and my constituents in Colorado with some clarity.
Absolutely.
I think, as my colleagues know, in Evergreen, Colorado, Jefferson County, a county that I proudly represent, at Evergreen High School, a shooter ultimately injured. 2 students were praying for their swift recovery. There's an article here from Colorado Public Radio. The title is, quote, FBI was already investigating an account that may have been linked to the Evergreen shooter. You're familiar with the circumstances generally, Director, regarding this terrible tragedy.
Yes.
So my understanding from the public reporting is that an organization reported to the FBI in July of this year regarding, just reading here from the article, that the FBI opened an assessment into a social media account user whose identity was unknown and who was discussing the planning of a mass shooting with threats nonspecific in nature. This is the FBI's statement to the press. And that the FBI continued to work this assessment investigation to identify the name and location of the user up until September 10th, 2025, which is the day of the tragedy. Can you provide us some clarity on what were the impediments to finding, the account user, and maybe describe in greater detail the FBI's work in that regard?
Generally speaking, yes, because I know even though the shooter's deceased, the investigation we're not done.
Sure.
And so the impediments to finding these individuals, and you highlight a great point. We had 2 huge tragedies in the span of days in this country, the school shooting in Evergreen, Colorado being one of them. And proactively going out onto these social media platforms, which are so large, is our biggest impediment. And we need to rely on the service providers. There's actual legislation, I can't remember the name of it, that's up for renewal, which will, and I think at the end of the month, which gives service providers the ability to report that information in from their end without liability. We need that to continue, because while the FBI has so many people and the police are great at doing it, there's just too many platforms to cover down on.
Well, I appreciate that, Director Patel, and I think we're certainly, I'm interested in continuing this conversation, because I think the reporting suggests that there's a pattern, and that ultimately we want to make sure that law enforcement is able to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in the future. I have a question. It's not meant as a gotcha question, so it just frame it there. But it is in regards to some reporting around a periodic transaction report that you had filed earlier, this year. So this is in July, pursuant to the ethical obligations as a senior executive official. You remember filing that in July?
Yes.
Yeah, so in that report, as best as I can surmise, you disclosed that you divested $100,000 or more in a variety of different stocks, which I presume was pursuant to the ethics agreement that you negotiated with the Department of Justice. In that same report, there's a disclosure regarding purchases of 2 different transactions. So between $15,000 to $50,000 in a national coffee house chain, and between $50,000 to $100,000 in a semiconductor company on May 9th and May 12th. Are those transactions that you're doing personally, or are these through a stockbroker, or are these transactions that you're handling yourself?
So how they happen is I submit proposals under DOJ guidance to say, hey, I would like to trade this or that, and they run their review, and the FBI runs a review, and then they come back and say yes or no, and then I make the transaction.
Is there a reason that you decided to make the purchases into those 2 companies?
Generally speaking, before I got this job, I was trading stocks, but not a lot like most people, and I just follow certain industries, and I thought they would be a good investment.
So the reason why I ask, right, because you had divested in other companies, and I presume that wasn't because there were actual conflicts. It's just that you wanted to avoid an appearance of impropriety.
It was both.
Both,
Yeah.
But not all of the companies were conflicts.
Whatever they make
divested from.
I don't make the call, they make the call.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess my point would be, the reason why I ask is, why I said it's not a gotcha question, I have for years led an effort here in Congress to try to ban members of Congress, senior executive officials, from trading stocks. And it's bipartisan in nature. We're working really hard to get that done, Republicans and Democrats. And you can understand, I think, given your role, given the nature of the position that you hold as the leader of the largest law enforcement agency in our country, that divesting entirely, not doing day trading now, I think would be something that would be in the interest of the American people. So I just would hope you would consider that, and that moving forward, that perhaps not purchasing stocks in individual companies, I would think would be something that would be worth pursuing.
Neguse begins by grounding his questioning in the real world, a school shooting in his district, Evergreen High School. He brings viewers back to the human impact: 2 students injured, families shattered, a community shaken. He isn't grandstanding. He's highlighting a very real and very painful fact. Americans are grieving because these tragedies keep happening. And when they do, people expect the FBI to be proactive, transparent, and effective. Neguse presses Patel on what impeded the Bureau from identifying an online account that had been flagged months before the shooting. Patel's answer is revealing. He emphasizes the challenges of monitoring massive online platforms and stresses the need for cooperation and legislative renewal. It's a reminder that while the right loves to scream about government overreach, the reality is that law enforcement often struggles with too little access, not too much. Neguse uses this moment to highlight a pattern: missed warnings, systemic weaknesses, and the need for congressional support that Republicans often block. Then Neguse pivots, and this is where the hearing becomes especially important for the public to understand. He brings up Patel's own financial disclosures, not to create a headline, but to ask a legitimate ethical question. Patel had sold off a variety of stocks earlier in the year as required by his ethics agreement. But around the same time, he also bought stock in a semiconductor company and a large national coffee chain. And here's the key: Patel didn't deny it. He explained how the purchases were approved under DOJ review. But Neguse's point was far bigger than a single transaction. He was raising the same concern many Americans have. How can anyone in a powerful, sensitive position, especially someone running the FBI, actively trade individual stocks at all? It's not just about legality, it's about trust. When someone has access to information the public doesn't, even the appearance of impropriety undermines faith in institutions. Neguse wasn't trying to embarrass Patel. He was pointing toward a policy solution he has championed for years: banning members of Congress and high-ranking federal officials from trading individual stocks to prevent even the perception that personal financial interests could influence public decisions. While Patel tried to frame the trades as normal behavior, Neguse reminded him that normal rules don't apply when you run the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. Americans deserve to know that the FBI director isn't placing bets, literally or figuratively, that could compromise his impartiality. This hearing was a masterclass in the difference between noise and real oversight. Neguse approached the issue thoughtfully and respectfully, but with a focus on the public interest. There were no theatrics, no conspiracy theories, no shouting matches, just good governance in action. And that's exactly what we need more of. If you appreciate content that breaks down these hearings from a fact-based, democratic perspective, where we actually analyze what happened instead of acting out political performance art, make sure you're subscribed. These moments matter, and the public deserves more than sound bites. They deserve understanding. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay loud, because oversight only works when voters demand it.